Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always such a pleasure to join you in your homes and share some wonderful information with you that is going to help you better your life and bring some joy into your town. Today we are so happy to be joined with Mr. Joe Gleason, and he is the owner of Gleason Financial Group. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joe.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
It's a pleasure to have you. You've been here before and had wonderful information to share with our viewing audience. And today you're bringing some new and different information. And very excited to hear about these topics. We're going to be speaking about economy. But before we get started, go ahead and share with the viewing audience who hasn't seen you before a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Joe Gleason. I own Gleason Financial Group, and we're out in Surprise, Arizona. We have been here in Arizona for right at 11 years. We're about a month shy of 11 years. So really excited about that. I'm used to the heat now, so I consider myself a local. I'm a father of 3 beautiful children and happily married to my wife, Jeanette. So.
Wonderful. And so you've been practicing here for 11 years in finance?
Yes.
Wonderful. And whereabouts did you come from?
I'm originally from the Chicago area. I grew up in a small little town about an hour and a half west of Chicago. So.
Wonderful. Well, we're happy to have you here. Yeah, and so as we get started here on our first issue, we're speaking about economy, and it is, am I working with the right advisor? This is something, whenever you hear this, especially for our viewing audience, whenever you hear of a financial advisor, a lot of times I think there's a misunderstanding that it's only for people who are wealthy or people who have a large estate or people that have something to advise on. And truly, it's something that anyone should have, because everyone has a financial future and a retirement and a family to look forward to.
Absolutely. You know, and what we've found is that there's so little advice that people are getting from company-sponsored plans like 401ks. They're really kind of left to do it on their own, which is the main form of savings right now in America. You know, it's great to have, and you know, for folks who have money to have an advisor. But you're exactly right. It's really for everyone. People should get those financial concepts and get the plans, and make sure that if they're not confident and capable of doing it on their own, to make sure that they're seeking out a professional that has their best interest at heart.
Well, finances are an intimidating thing, and learning interest rates in the market, and it's something that if you have a full-time job and a family, you don't have the time to research and to really understand what it really means, and turn on, you know, the market every day and watch the numbers going across the bottom. To the average consumer, that's gonna be very intimidating. So an advisor would be someone that would just sit down with you. And what is the role of an advisor to just an everyday person that works a 9-to-5 job and has a family?
Great question. You know, there's a lot of options that are out there. And so the first thing is to really kind of understand what the different components are. The big thing that we advise folks to look into is finding out if someone has a fiduciary responsibility. President Obama actually has been pushing legislation to make it mandatory that everyone in the financial industry that helps folks with this sort of thing, that they have this designation. But as we sit here today, that's not currently the case. And what that simply means is that the person that has the fiduciary designation, that they are legally bound to act in your best interest. The other standard that's out there is called the suitability standard, which means that sort of as things line up on the paper, you know, 1 + 1 = 2 for this person, that almost any product or any financial concept can be advised or recommended. With the fiduciary standard, we have to roll up our sleeves a little more. We have to really get to know the person based on their goals, what their objectives are, what their risk tolerance is, and really put ourselves in their shoes to make sure they're getting planning the right financial tools to help them meet their goals.
So in order for someone to be a financial planner or advisor, do they have to have some sort of certification, or is there a government standard they have to follow, and how can people verify if they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are different licenses, but there are essentially 3 big areas. There is the securities area, which would be more of like what we would think of as the Wall Street type of, you know, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. That would be the securities industry. There's the insurance industry, which would be insurances, life insurance, annuities. Those all fit in that insurance realm, as well as things like homeowners insurance, property and car insurance, those things. Then there's banking, which would be things like bank CDs, savings accounts, checking accounts, and those. So in the securities and in the insurance worlds, there are licenses that are required. And within each of those, there are licenses within licenses. So that's where it really gets tricky for the consumers is, I go into the bank and they're telling me that I should get a CD, but then they're recommending me over to this financial advisor. And so the licenses can be kind of all across the board. But if I were just getting started right now, the first thing that I would look for is someone that has a fiduciary responsibility, just to make sure that that they're looking out for your best interest and not just trying to pitch a product and sell you something.
And so is that something you can just ask someone if they have that
Absolutely.
fiduciary? So that's a great note to take for consumers that probably would never know to ask that, is
Right.
to protect them and to protect themselves and their families. So you just mentioned a word being sold. So that's something that I think a lot of people get concerned with. One of my favorite shows is American Greed. And it's great, but it's also a little frightening because you see how these people have taken advantage of consumers and you don't know, are you being sold? Are you being consulted? Are you being helped? Are you being scammed? How do people know the difference, and what should they really look out for?
And that is really the scary part because it's so nimble in the financial industry, because what might be the right thing for you might be the worst thing for me. And so when you're going in and sitting down with someone to find out about what the planning steps that they would take or what advice that they would be giving you, you don't know if it's something that's in the financial professional's best interest or if it's yours. So again, I always go back to that fiduciary standard, and I by no means mean to throw anyone that doesn't have that standard under the bus. I strongly believe that the vast majority of people in our industry genuinely want to give good advice and help. But I would also look for more layers of licenses. I think especially with the complexities of our economy and with all the different choices that are out there, that it's in the client and in the consumer's best interest to work with someone that has a more comprehensive or a broader stroke that they can paintbrush that they can paint with in the financial services arena. Because, for example, if you're only working with someone that can only do one segment of it, well, then guess what? You're going to get recommended. That one area. So it's if all you have in your tool belt's a hammer, everyone starts looking like a nail. It's that old saying, right?
Yeah.
So if you're working with someone that has more designations, more licenses, those types of things, then you're really positioning yourself to get a more comprehensive,
a well-rounded approach.
Absolutely.
And if it's someone that works in the financial industry, they probably want to get as many certifications and licenses as possible just to ensure themselves and ensure that for the client. And so that being said, with that comes an advisor. Of course, there's always going to be fees and things associated with that. What should people know about that? What's too much? And how do they ensure that there's a transparency to protect themselves and their finances that they're entrusting to someone?
Well, it should be asked right up front, how do you get paid? If the advisor or the financial professional is not stating that right off the bat, that they should ask. It's up to the consumer to find out how that professional is being compensated. It might be a salary position. In larger firms and larger agencies, you might be working with someone that's licensed, but they might not have anything based off of the investments or the amount of money that's being invested. It might just be a salaried position. But there might be folks that are compensated via commission, which they get a percentage of however much money gets placed with the firm. Or it may be a position where they're getting charged a fee, or the advisor may be getting a percentage of on an ongoing basis, like a piece of the overall portfolio. So if someone invests $1 million, they might get 0.5% of that, and if they grow the account up to $2 million, well then all boats rise. Everyone's making more money. But it should be disclosed what type of or how the professional is being compensated, so that then the consumer can decide, gosh, do I want someone that's going to get a commission, which isn't a bad thing, or am I working with someone who's charging me a fee, or a combination? It should be known.
And it should probably depend, too, on how much you're speaking about putting with them and how much money you have to invest and put away.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you don't want to, be charging someone a percentage or a large fee and they only are investing, $10,000 or $20,000 and take away from that if it's an individual that just has a small savings or something. So.
And then you want to know what you're getting. So if you are getting charged a fee, or if that person's earning a commission, does that mean that you helped me transact this and place this business with the said company, and then I never see or hear from you again? Or does it mean we're going to meet annually, semi-annually? What do I get for your compensation? I think that's another excellent question to be asking as you're sort of interviewing and searching for the right advisor. I think that relationship as I see it, I think the relationship is extremely important, especially when you're looking at someone's finances. That's one of the most important areas of someone's life, maybe behind health and their faith and some of those different areas. Money is very important. So I think the relationship, I look at it as more of a relationship-based scenario rather than a transaction.
Well, to remember they are working for you, right?
I say it to my clients all the time, just keep in mind who works for who here.
Yeah, so exactly. You're working for the client.
Exactly.
And so that's very important. And so lastly, you mentioned personality and kind of knowing someone, and there's different types of advisors, I'm sure, and there's always different personality types. So how do you know if it's the right fit, and what are some advice you have for people if they're going through this process and trying to begin their planning and their financial planning?
Yeah, I as folks are going through this process, I advise that really, follow your intuition, follow your gut. But really, as I see it in my almost 18 years of experience, I really see it almost in two areas of the type of financial advisors that there are. And this is aside from licenses and designations, and maybe if they're a smaller shop or a big firm, the personality types really kind of fall into two areas as I see it. On one hand, you've got the personality type of someone who's really more outgoing and is very interested in the relationship and is very involved with understanding the family dynamic and all the different components of that, and really in a very outgoing sort of relationship or personality style. The other is someone who tends to be maybe the financial advisor tends to be a little more numbers focused, which I'm not saying that the other side isn't, but someone that's maybe more introverted, maybe more focused on the fundamentals.
A little more analytical,
yeah, maybe more analytical. And so nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's just what I've found is that some personality types from the client side resonate with one side more than maybe the other. But again, who works for who? The advisors are who work for the clients, and so it's really up to the clients and the consumer to find that match. And if it's not a match, having the ability to say, you know what, I appreciate your time, but I'm going to continue my search.
And so that being said, just as a last thing here, if somebody is working for a company, or maybe they've worked for smaller companies or had more in and out jobs, kind of their ins and outs, their life, and they don't have a 401k or an IRA or that option readily available to them, what's a good alternative as far as a savings or something that they can do to plan for the future? Because as we all know, there's uncertainty with Social Security and with many government programs that were intended to help people in their older age. And that's something that everyone should consider, because eventually we're all going to be of retirement age. So what's something that they should look at just as an option, or where should they even begin to look? Because where do they start?
So that really depends on where someone already is on that timeline of age-wise. So someone that's 5 years removed from retirement, where they should start would be completely different than maybe someone that just got out of school. Someone that's just getting out of school has time on their side, so the types of investments and the planning and the strategies that they would use might be more risk-based, because they can afford to ride the ebbs and flows of the market, versus someone who's closer to retirement that needs to be really mindful of the risk that they're taking, because if there's a correction, market goes down, they're taking too much risk, that could really could have a bad effect on if they're able to retire or the type of retirement that they have. But I would definitely consider a few things: the risk tolerance, the amount of risk that's comfortable or appropriate for them, and also always keep in mind the tax component of it. When are you going to pay tax? So when you make money, is it when you're putting money into the account? Have you already been taxed? Is it growing tax deferred? Is it going to be taxed when you pull the money out? And so those are things that if those aren't comfortable topics for you, the consumer, that you should absolutely be working with an advisor who understands that dynamic as well.
No, and that's something that I know for most people, they hear that, tax now, tax deferred, what's the difference?
Right.
And so that's very important to be advised and be wise and educated. And I know that, there's lots of information you can go to online as well and research. And so just be educated and know yourself, but plan ahead. I think that's the most important thing, and know that you can trust someone that you work with. So thank you so much, Joe, for joining us for this first segment of Joy in Our Town. It's always a pleasure to have you. If you have any questions, his information's been displayed at the bottom of the screen. But please don't go anywhere, because we will be right back after this short message.
I can solve difficult problems for a Fortune 500 company.
I can run a successful business.
I
I can put my military experience to work for your company.
I can manage your home improvements.
I can publicize your message.
I can teach your children.
But I can't put my skills to work for your organization
if I'm not given the opportunity.
Nearly 50 million Americans have disabilities. Capitalize on their talents with employment practices that benefit everyone. Learn more at whatcanyoudocampaign.org.
Welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. Thank you so much for staying with us. If you just happen to be joining us today, we are joined by Joe Gleason, and he is the owner of Gleason Financial Group. Thank you so much for staying with us, Joe.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And one thing that Joe mentioned during the break, that if you want to grab a pen and paper, he does have a couple websites that are great resources for you that are federally based websites, so that way you can go and research and find out some information for yourself. And what are those websites, Joe?
So for the securities-based advisors, the Wall Street type of accounts, there are a couple regulatory agencies or that folks can go look into a person's background.
Okay.
So if there's been customer complaints or if there's any sort of slaps on the wrist for bad behavior, they can go to FINRA.com, F-I-N-R-A, FINRA.com,
okay.
or they can go to the SEC website, SEC.com, and then for the insurance-based professionals, you can go to the Arizona Department of Insurance, or if you're working with someone from out of state, each state has their own Department of Insurance.
Okay, so these are government agencies then, so people as consumers can make sure that they're not working with someone who has a lot of history that's not in their favor.
Right.
So
if there's something negative, it's going to be disclosed.
Okay.
And so it's just a safety mechanism for folks if they're really not if they're not sure otherwise. It's just another area where they can protect themselves.
Well, and that's very smart, because there obviously is a lot of fraud out there, and whenever you're dealing with money, it's always important to protect yourself as a consumer. So that is great information, and I hope you were able to get that information there. But as we move into this next segment, we are speaking about, is your financial house in order? This is something I think where we kind of started to touch on at the end of the last segment with, a 401k and an IRA. How do you plan for the future? One thing that we all hear, the American dream, this dream lifestyle that's being sold to us. What is a dream lifestyle, and how can we achieve that without putting ourselves at financial risk?
Well, there's a lot of components to it that I think it varies based on each person. Without getting into the technicalities yet of the different types of investments in the different areas, really what we talk a lot about and spend a lot of time getting our arms around with our clients as we're getting to know them is what is important to you. What does financial success mean to you? Because for some folks, it might mean that I get to go traveling and see all the different states. That was one of my grandparents' big goal when they retired. They wanted to go see every state in the union, which I think is a great, cool goal. But it might be spending more time with family. It might be being able to give back and to get more involved with charities and different philanthropic type of endeavors. So everyone's idea of financial success kind of shoots out of one of those areas. And so, again, I work for my clients, and we think of it that way, to where we want to help embrace and empower folks to live that dream lifestyle, because then they have a better overall, you have financial success, but then it gives you all the other areas of success in your life as well. And the money just sort of intertwines in amongst it all, so that you have that better self-image, and you're more comfortable with your retirement.
Yeah, but it's their dream. Everybody has their own dream, and it's absolutely true. If you watch, there's a variety now we see of reality shows and all these. Everyone has their own idea of what success is and what financial success is, and what's comfortable for them. So that's probably the most important thing to note, is that don't make your dream someone else's. What right. do you want in life? And it is achievable if you plan and do it correctly.
And that's really the fun part of it all, is to help take those ideas of what folks think is a ideal retirement or a dream lifestyle, and to use the financial tools to help empower them to be able to go achieve that. That's really the rewarding part of it all for me. It's really a blessing to be able to help be a part of that process.
Well, it's true, and I think it's one of those things, even as I grow older, and I think as everyone grows older and starts to learn a little bit more about money and looks at budgets and things of that nature, there's really a lot of things that you would think are completely out of reach in your life, whether it be on your salary, because you're not making as much as the next person. But if you plan ahead and you cut here and you cut there and you take time, you really can achieve your financial dreams and your goals. And whether, like you said, to be traveling or a home or a car, they really are possible. wonderful. And with that being said, that means that someone's financial house needs to be in order. So what
Correct.
are some components of that?
Well, the first step really is maximizing your income. And what I mean by that is it's not always just go out and make the most money. It's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? And so if you've got areas in your budget that are leaky, for example, we talk about gray charges with our clients, things like gym memberships that you never go to, or extra channels on the cable or satellite, or even cable and satellite itself. If you're spending a lot of money in those areas that really can be set aside or not spent, then that's addition by subtraction.
Necessities, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's really the first thing is to get serious about what's important and where your money goes, and be mindful of where your money goes. It's pretty easy in today's society to spend a few dollars here and a few dollars there. I get the coffee on the way to work every day. I go out to lunch every day, and if you really analyze it and are present about that, then you can cut costs there. So increase your income, and it might mean going out and getting a second job or starting a part-time business or any of those things where you can then take those extra dollars and live now, go have fun, go budget for that vacation or spend time with your family or be able to donate to charities and do those things that empower you. But it also might be setting aside more money for down the road, for retirement and when you do want to start your retirement. So that's one area where you can start doing that.
And that's one thing that I remember my dad always said when I was growing up is, always live below your means. And I think that's probably something where you're right, it is so easy, especially now with credit cards and with debit cards. I've noticed myself personally, if I have cash and I spend cash, I'm a lot slower to spend it than with a piece of plastic, because it doesn't really correlate as much inside of your mind that this is actual dollars going out. It's like,
right.
It's very easy to spend $40 on a debit card, but if you hand them two $20 bills, it's like
that's a little more painful, right?
That's a lot. That feels like a lot more money than just swiping a card.
Totally
and so
agree.
it's probably just being aware and going back and looking over your monthly statements. And you mentioned the coffee. I did that. I remember about a couple years ago, I finally looked at every day going to a coffee shop, and it hurt. I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, this is coffee.
Right.
Like, that should be a treat. That should be, go out on a weekend, go do something if you meet with somebody and sit down. But it's so easy, and it's this consumer society to just spend a few $100s on something a month. And if you look at the end of the year, that's over $1,000.
Right, and we all do it.
Yeah.
And so I would say don't beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
When's the best time to plant an oak tree? 100 years ago. When's the next best time? Right now. So just cut it out of your budget now and get more disciplined, and then you can have the lifestyle in retirement that you dream of. It's very possible.
So why are aggregating and organizing so important then?
Well, this is one area that, as my firm and in my practice as I've gotten older and more experienced, this is one area where I really feel as financial professionals that we really have I think we've allowed this to slip through the cracks a little. And I'll tell a quick story and then use that as why I think it's so important. We had some dear clients of ours about a year and a half ago. The husband passed away, and he was a very organized, very diligent saver, had a very nice nest egg, but it was spread out over a lot of different places. Part of their dollars were with us and then in some banks and different investment firms, and they were originally from Boston. Here in Arizona, a lot of folks come here from somewhere else. So their things were everywhere. He passed away, and the wife was not as familiar with what the nest egg was comprised of. And so when he passed away, she was really lost. And she was going through the heartache and the pain of having just lost her spouse. And she was in disarray. And so I helped with the pieces that I could, but was not able to really advise and help get things organized like they should. And so when we talk about aggregating and organizing, it's really to have everyone be on the same page while everyone's alive and while they're of sound mind and these sorts of things, so that when life happens, when we get sick or when we pass away, that it's not scramble and hurry up and get it figured out now. And sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that simply means, well, I'll just get a will or a trust, and it's sort of spelled out loosely there, which those are great things to do as well. But it means things like if you have special needs children, what happens? If you have the family, grandfather clock that, there's some dissension among the ranks as to who gets it, to clarify those things and have it all spelled out beforehand, so that, as I said, when life happens, that's not the time to deal with it. It's beforehand. So it's really, we've found that that's been a very helpful part of the overall planning, is to get all those things set and organized. If someone gets sick, what happens here, what money is allocated for that, and to have it present and available.
And that's probably a very hard conversation to have for a lot of families, because you feel as though you're planning for your demise or your health declining, but it's planning ahead and it's being responsible. And even though it may be difficult to sit down with children or with a parent and say, hey, we need to spell this out and what's going to happen here, it's important, and it's something that everyone needs to do. Correct? It's not planning for your passing or for something. It's planning for your loved ones, so that they don't have to deal with that while you're gone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, because things change. You know, you might have your 401k at the company that you then roll over to the IRA if you leave that position, but you've got all the old documentation and all the paperwork and folders from the old 401k. So if something were to happen to you, well, where do those dollars? It gets confusing. It happens a lot with life insurance policies. You know, companies go from this company, they get bought out or merge, and so it looks like you might have 3 policies, but you really only have one. And so it's really just, I can't stress how important it is to really get that upfront and constantly updating, because when you have that peace of mind of knowing that that's all handled and that it's organized and that you can know, and there's tools you can know it on a daily basis, where when market fluctuations change, that we can have that resource available for our clients, that it just gives folks such a peace of mind. And it gives them a up-to-date knowledge of where everything is, which gives them the ability to go live their dream lifestyle.
Exactly, and that's so important. Well, thank you so much, Joe, as always, for joining us and for sharing this wonderful information with our viewers. Thank you at home. I think the key from today is plan, be aware, be educated, and you will have a wonderful life, and we look forward to seeing you next week on Joy in Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.